Jeremy, good to have you this morning. Appreciate your time. Thank you for taking some time for us. I want to start with what arguably was the biggest, most controversial, divisive issue the board has dealt with over the last year, and that's mental health services. So the way I want to frame the question is this: how will the delivery of mental health services be improved in your mind as a result of the process the board went through over the last year? How will things be better?
Sure. So I think the budgetary process is going to be much better in our future region, and I think that providers have already seen that by their CEO reaching out to them and meeting with every one of them. Long-term services are going to be critical for the health of mental health services, and having the spending authority, which is approximately $4.2 million in the future region versus about $3.1 million in Woodbury County currently, I think is going to be critical. And I think just a culture that's very healthy. I went to the last Rolling Hills meeting, and the spirit of camaraderie, discussion, and input from mental health providers, I think was a welcomed and going to be a great change. And so I look to our largest mental health provider, Siouxland Mental Health, who's excited about the meetings that have been had. And I think things like the Crisis and Stabilization Center and the new access centers that the legislature recently mandated to be put into place in the next couple of years, I think this is going to be a way that we can really garner some of that energy in this new region. And I think it's going to be great for mental health service delivery.
What will the impact be on taxpayers of this change?
I think for taxpayers, it's going to give them an ability to fund those mental health services, not necessarily a mandate to have more tax dollars necessarily, but have the ability to fund that which frankly has been cut during this past year because of that spending authority that's not there in our current region.
Any second guesses of anything in this process in terms of your participation or board decisions, or how the process went? And when you look back on it now, anything you would have done differently? Any second guessing of anything the way it was handled?
No, I think we ultimately have done the right thing as a board, and the board supported that overwhelmingly, and I think ultimately it's going to be best for mental health service delivery.
Next question is on guns in the courthouse, another big issue that was dealt with by the board. What first is your opinion of how the board handled that issue? And second, just in a personal sense, what's your opinion of having guns, allowing people to have guns in the courthouse?
So I think that we were put into a very difficult position by the legislature that passed a law that stated that there would be standing for a citizen to bring litigation if they felt there was an adverse impact by not being able to carry. And so we were put into that position. Over 2, 3, 4 different meetings, we wrestled with how that would be implemented, and it's a thorny issue. At the end of the day, I believe that the compromise that I really brought forward was that guns don't ultimately belong in the courthouse, especially when court is in session because of the volatility, and the implementation of doing so would have been very difficult, and the sheriff shared that. Whether there was going to be increased cost or the manageability just wouldn't have been there. So I don't believe at the end of the day that guns should be allowed in the courthouse for that reason, for both the difficulty in implementing it and the constraints. I felt that we were put into the position by the legislature and trying to really thread the needle. But I think at the end of the day, we came up with a right and fair solution, which is to respect the court order, but then we also do allow for that concealed carry in places like conservation cabins in our parks and in different areas where we felt to the best of our ability we were following the intent of what was passed law.
Any need to or thought on your part in terms of expanding security to other county buildings, taking steps to improve security in other county buildings, such as the Trosper Hoyt building?
I think that we can, and we consistently do meet on improving safety, improving security. And so whether that's behind the scenes camera footage and work, roving personnel, I don't believe that right now we are going to implement the same sort of courthouse security at the other buildings.
Okay.
I think it would be cost prohibitive, and I think that there's ways that we can tackle that safely and efficiently, doing what we've done in the past. And so right now, I believe at the end, although it was a protracted process to get there, that we made the right decision as a board.
How do you rate your board as a steward of the property tax dollar?
Very, very well. I think the last 4 years we've been able to lower the tax levy and have really worked hard to do so, and have done so in assessment and non-assessment years, and doing so for 4 years straight is not only for the county board unprecedented, but I think if you look at what it's taken to be able to do so, it's taken a lot of hard work, including combining HR and assistant HR director positions, juvenile detention, we did the same thing, planning and zoning and economic development, duplications in service delivery. We've really spent over 30 budget meetings the last 4 years, going line by line, and anything from energy efficiencies, which we've realized $68,000 the first year in those energy savings, or looking at what's mandated and not mandated. Nearly $250,000 of nonprofit funding. We believe that while noble in intent, wasn't a mandated service. So we've really rolled up our sleeves, and it's had an effect, I think, both for property taxpayers and for economic development. We went from second out of 27 counties in a 100-mile radius, and we've now fallen to 8th. And I think that that means that others we've surpassed in being able to lower the levy, and I think that has an impact on economic development as well.
The second, and now you're 8th, what? Second in what?
The second highest property tax levy in our unincorporated areas, and that was something that was really a goal of the board, is when businesses are looking to either expand or to come into our community and look at that rate, second highest out of 27 counties, doesn't look very good. And we're trying to consistently do all that we can to keep our rates low and to affect property taxes for families as well.
Are there other, if you were reelected looking into a next term, other ways that you would, that are priorities of yours in terms of improving the budget process still more? Are there ideas you have that haven't been implemented that you would like to look at implementing that would make that process more effective for the taxpayer?
Absolutely.
And what would those be?
Sure. So I think we've done a good job of getting some granularity on the line-by-line budgeting items. When we first came, there were budgets, line items that hadn't been spent in years. There were very nondescript sort of labels on things. I think we need to start looking at long-term planning increasingly. We've done so with our buildings. We've done so a little bit with dedicating new CF industry revenue, half of which we passed would go to taxpayers. But I think looking 5, 10, 15 and 20 years down the road at what's on the horizon, if we know that health insurance trends are going in a certain direction, if we know that we're going to need to programmatically look at a building improvement project, how do we get our heads around that and start to build up perhaps in reserve or in other areas to be able to match anticipated revenue with those expenditures. So I think that's something that we really need to challenge our department heads to be looking what's on the horizon, so that we're not just looking at this year, but we're looking at something like when the legislature looked at 2-year budgets and looked at longer term planning. I think that's integral that we get to that. And we've been able to do a lot, but I think we have some more work to be done in that area.
Well, the next question is kind of related to that. It's related to the budget, it's related to tax dollars, it's related to looking ahead, and that is the county is going to start realizing extra money from the CF project, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the next budget year. In other words, you would have that money available to start looking at when you start your budget process in early 2019. What are your priorities as a board member for how that extra revenue from the CF project should be used?
Sure. So my number one priority is something that I asked the board to pass, and they did. It was 3-2 at the time. I had bipartisan support at the time. And that was the taxpayer's first resolution, which said 1 out of every $2 is going to go to the property taxpayer. So we don't inordinately grow the size and scope of county government. That said, CF Industries revenue will come in as a trickle at first and exponentially grow as it stair steps on its abatement schedule. And so with that, the taxpayer needs property tax relief for families and businesses, but then I'd also like to look at investing in our infrastructure, whether that's our county buildings for the long term. We have the county courthouse that we have identified through long-term planning and through study has a lot of needs, not only for its historic preservation, but its functions in delivering services, including our court system. So looking at that, looking at the law enforcement center and the needs of our jail there, as well as our secondary roads. The last 30 years, I believe that that the board has kept its nose an inch above the water, and it's time to do much better in terms of long-term planning and investing in some of our infrastructure and some of those needs, whether it be buildings or secondary road system.
What do you see the board's role as, and what do you support and advocate for in terms of expansion of economic development within Woodbury County? What steps do you advocate for? What steps do you support? What do you think your role and place is in that area? Sure.
So I think it's being a great partner of our business community, of the Chamber of Commerce, and working with not only private industry and listening to what the needs are, but also being an active player. Whether this board has taken, I think, a more active role in cooperation with the City of Sioux City, whether that's the Interstate Justification Report that we are consistently studying, or investing in a transformative $72 million reinvestment district. I don't believe the prior board would have done so at all. We've met time and time again, and I think that setting the conditions for economic development, such as that does, is going to be critical. And so I believe not only our participation there, but also being light on our feet. And by that I mean, are we willing to, whether it's an incentive or rebate tax program, are we willing to help steward that innovative economic development? I believe we have. I believe if you look at Jolita's expansion, AGP's, we were actively involved in those and working to support our chamber and the Siouxland Initiative, and I think the results will speak for themselves.
Where does today, through the years, a lot of talk about the idea of a mega site, which I think is 1,000 acres, continuous tracts of land, certified by the state. Where does that topic in your mind stand today? Where do you personally stand on that issue, pushing for that issue, advocating for that issue? I know you don't just snap your fingers and acquire 1,000 acres of land.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifting involved in something like that. But just talk to that just a bit.
Mm-hmm. I think the difficulty in putting together a mega site is in coming up with the options on that contiguous land, all told. That said, we have worked behind the scenes to lean forward on any opportunity, whether it's with IEDA and the Siouxland Initiative and Chamber of Commerce on doing so. Those have limits, and some of those limits are whether or not you can put together enough land from those who are willing to participate in options, whether it's private landholders or those who have large business development and would be necessary players in that as well. Do I think that it's doable? Yes, I think it's a real challenge though, and it's not as easy said, or it's not easily done. And so I think in that, I'm certainly willing and advocate our county continue to have those conversations, but whether or not that can become a reality, I think has some constraints outside of our control.
The relationship with the city is another issue through the years that we've talked with you and other board members and candidates for the board about, and you alluded to that in an earlier answer to a question, working with the city on economic development, for example. But how would you rate the relationship between the county and the city today? And within that, we've talked to you about this in the past, the idea of consolidation of services, where the city and the county work together to see if there's ways where they can save the taxpayer some money by consolidating areas of government. So first, the overall relationship, and second, are there areas you would like to look at, pursue, talk about in terms of consolidation?
So I think the cooperation and the relationship with the city is very good. I received a call last week to meet with the mayor on an issue upcoming concerning a building that may be of interest to the county. I think that we have a good relationship. I think we're able to sit down at the table and work on issues together. I have no qualms in picking up the phone and saying, here's an issue I think that we can work on, as I know we do, on either secondary roads issues or our shared technology between WCICC, which runs both the county and the city together. We have looked and we have been able to realize, short of joint purchasing, a shared contract under which we get bulk rate discounting on purchases, and we've had some of our staff be meeting. I think that there are ways that we can continually look to see if we can increase that cooperation, but I think the relationship is very good. A couple of years ago at Western Iowa Tech, Dan Moore mentioned that he believed that the city-county cooperation had never been better. I believe that that's the case. I don't believe that a past board would have participated to the level that we have in economic development. And let me just say this too, as well. Sitting at the table and letting the city know some of the constraints that we felt that county taxpayers may have in that participation, we're appreciative of their response. We're appreciative of being able to participate in such a way that IEDA said was going to be critical to having that reinvestment district. So I think that give and take's very healthy, and I think that relationship is a very good one.
Can I piggyback a quick question? Mm-hmm. What responsibility does the county have in making sure there's affordable housing? Because, you know, it's very nice to know that we have companies coming in, but a lot of people say, I can't afford to move to Sioux City because there's no affordable housing for me. And some of the jobs that are coming in too don't pay top dollar. So what can the county do to help ease that situation?
I think it's a difficult one in the sense that you have the city of Sioux City that runs its own sort of housing program. We do participate in the Housing Trust Fund to be able to rehabilitate nuisance abatement out in our rural areas, as well as property tax credits to help. So those are more of our bedroom communities that we're looking to help along those lines. As far as other housing development, I think it's looking at ways to support those who would want to come forward and say, we have an innovative idea, but we're going to need some help. We're going to need some help either on a tax abatement schedule, short of direct investment, which I have more trouble with on an incentives basis. But I think those are ways that we can look to help.
And you'd be open to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Your answer to this question might be topics we've already talked about, but I wanted to ask you, what, if you had a top, say, 2 or 3, what would be some of the accomplishments that you were most proud of that this board, and including you, has accomplished in the last 4 years?
Sure. So I think the budget process that's really taken and put the taxpayer at the forefront would be the first one. Innovative solutions, I think the difficult challenges, and I know the threading the needle with guns in the courthouse is a difficult one, but I think at the end of the day we made the right decision. The Siouxland paramedics no longer providing paramedic coverage. At the end of the day, was able to put forward a plan to provide paramedic coverage without a tax increase. I'm getting control of our energy costs, becoming the first county to have all LED lit buildings and new steam traps, closing Prairie Hills that was set to cost $1.2 million the next 10 years. I was told that couldn't be done, that we have too many things. We just put a new roof on it and it holds some functions for training for the sheriff. We've now closed that. We've relocated the kitchen facilities there to the law enforcement center, and we've realized those savings. And I think just having a professional approach to county government, whether that's department head evaluations that had fallen by the wayside, getting a hold of time clock management, having department head meetings, and then finally I'd look at transparency and accessibility. We are very, very detailed, and sometimes our meetings do run 2 or 3 or 4 hours long, but we try to give a lot of backup, live stream on YouTube so that those who can't make it can see it from a distance. Having a meeting room that holds more than 50 people, as we had just last meeting on an overpass issue. And I think those sort of things I'm proudest of, in being able to even meet in every rural community and really bring county government to the people. So I think those things have been a game changer, all told, in the level of responsiveness and dedication that we're giving as far as a board.
Looking ahead then, if you win re-election, what would be priorities of yours in a next 4-year term?
So I think long-term planning is going to be critical. We have needs that we have identified, whether that's the courthouse or the law enforcement center that has a jail with a capacity of 224. I think investing in those are going to be key, and I'll tell you why. Not only does it have a public safety component with both the jail and our court system, but it also has a taxpayer implication. I believe that in the past the board looked at the small crack on the windshield and said, we'll just wait, and then ended up spending 3 or 4 times as much in the future in emergency reactiveness instead of proactiveness. So I think long-term planning is going to become critical. I think keeping the county board to its word on investing CF Industries revenue money and new monies that are coming online for that matter, as well as economic development. We're in a really critical time as a community, and it's an exciting time, but I think in being really cooperators with our different entities on this reinvestment district is going to be key, and that looks to job growth and to that workforce development as well.
All right, then I'm going to move to a couple of wrap-up questions, and I'll sort of combine them into one question. First part of the question is, what do you think are your greatest personal attributes that you apply to this position? And then second, why are you the better candidate, and why should the voters give you another 4 years on the board?
I think the greatest personal attribute is a passion for people. I really enjoy sitting down and listening to people's perspectives, hearing what it is and what will actually affect people and their families. And so whether that's on a mental health issue and getting access to services, or understanding the implications for secondary roads for our ag community and farm families, I think that passion to sit down and listen to people is something that I hold very near. And thinking in terms of every budget decision we make, how is it affecting the bottom line, whether that's for a family or for a small business. And so I take that very seriously. I think as far as things that I believe are reasons to vote for me in this next election, is that I believe that I bring all of my experience from many different walks of life, whether that's from being an educator or being in the military to being a small business owner. And I try to put myself in the shoes of those whom we're affecting, whether that's tax rates or the facilities people are walking into or the historic preservation that we're engaged in. And so I really believe that in the future we have some exciting times ahead of us. And I want to make sure that I came back to this community after going off to college in New York, and wanted to raise a family here, and I hope to have the same opportunities for my kids someday, that they'll want to have and live in this area, have the economic development, so that there's opportunities to do so. And so I plan to bring all the passion that I've brought these last 4 years to the next 4 in improving our community.
Well, thank you for your time this morning.
Yeah,
We
thank you,
appreciate
Mike.
it.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.